Welcome to the show, everyone. This is the Voices of Healing podcast. I'm your host, Tina Clark. I'm honored to have today's guest on the show. His name is Dr. John Nieters. He's a functional medicine practitioner and a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. Boy, I could talk to you for hours about that. He recovered from congestive heart failure and pneumonia to excellent health in 120 days at the age of 72. So I can't wait to hear more about your background, Dr. John, and then we'll get into your healing journey. But welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. And Tina, I really want to thank you personally for the invite. It's really exciting for me for a couple of reasons. One, I was impressed by the quality of people that you interview and felt honored that you would have me on. And then I really liked your style, your interviewing style, because you really let people tell their story. And so I was very pleased to be able to come on this morning.
Yes, I'm a big believer in storytelling. I don't know if you know, but I had a previous podcast I hosted called My Weirdest Experience.
Oh,
It's
wow.
still out there, 2 years of episodes, 104 interviews, and people came on and talked about the craziest, weirdest thing that ever happened to them.
Oh, I'm going to have to go listen to that. I didn't know that was out there, but that sounds like it would have been really fun to do.
It was really fun. And, when you start a podcast, you look at the numbers, they can be kind of meager. So I don't really focus on that. I focus on just creating really good content and putting it out there. And when I started this podcast last fall, my very first guest did some homework on me. And he said, did you know that your previous podcast is in the top 10% of most popular podcasts in the world, according to listennotes.com? And I was like, no, I had no idea.
That is great. That's fabulous.
So it goes to show you, if you put it out there, people will eventually find you. Just keep talking about it and keep, just put your content out there.
One of the things I've found from being a long-term instructor and teacher, which I love teaching, is I'll have students come up 20 years after I put something out into the world and thank me for it. And I'd totally forgotten about doing it. I had actually 3 different times. My wife has been different places. She's also an acupuncturist and teaches sports medicine. And people have come up to her and said, "Are you Jenny Nieters? Are you married to Dr. John Nieters?" And she said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Because I called in on his radio show like 12 years ago. And I was so impressed with the advice that he gave me about my mother that I became an acupuncturist." And what could be more touching than that? To know that you really made a difference in someone's life. So I'm so glad you've got that content out there.
Me too. And I'm one of those people that think long term. So, I'm doing this so that my children and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren can know me. And those episodes are going to be out there, and they're going to go, "Oh, that's the way she sounded like. That's what she was interested in. This is what she was like."
That's beautiful. I love that.
And same thing for you, Dr. John. Your stuff is out there. I know you're like a prolific guest on podcasts, and so there's a lot of content on you.
Yeah, and I just have a book that's in editing now. It'll be out soon. And then what I want to talk about today is another book that's in the writing phase. And so to me, that's kind of a legacy for my children.
Exactly. And so I also released 2 books last year. So one is on shamanic healing and the other is on holistic healing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Huh? Getting it from all sides. Huh?
Yeah. So let's get into you and talk about you, Dr. John, and your background, and just walk us into your story.
Absolutely. So I'm getting out of the starting blocks a little before the starter fires the pistol. I mentioned the book that I'm working on now, and the working title is Never, Ever, Ever Give Up. And so it's my personal story going from intensive care to really radiant health in about 4 months. So my background, I'm a doctor of acupuncture and oriental medicine. I've been doing this for a few decades. I also am certified in functional medicine. And functional medicine, a lot of people, that's a term that has become more popular, but a lot of people don't really understand what that means. And basically, a group of very bright people, PhDs and MDs, et cetera, naturopaths, got together a few decades ago and said, we see the medical establishment has some real power in treating people that are really sick and keeping them alive, but it isn't really directed at keeping people healthy. So they studied 10,000 or so different patient histories and looked at labs and determined some values for labs that they felt would keep people in the optimum range. And what we've then done, Catherine Black, my co-author, and I, is we've actually published not just the ranges. We have done excerpts from the studies, the research studies, showing that those are the best values, and we've included the graphs. And I think the graphs make all the difference because you can just see, oh, there's a big difference in having a hemoglobin A1C or blood sugar of 5.3 and 5.6, even though 5.6 is considered good, it's considered normal, it's not as good as 5.3. And so that's and to me, the traditional Chinese medicine and functional medicine really have the same direction. If you're sick, we want to help you become not sick, have you become well again. But really, really, the ideal for us is to have you not get sick at all. And so that is my background. I've also spent decades of practicing and teaching Chinese internal martial arts, and the one people are most familiar with is Tai Chi. They think of it as kind of a cute dance, but my teacher was actually the world's martial arts champion in 1978, and he was a Tai Chi player. So it has tremendous power on many levels, and it's a wonderful meditational art. And that's why I did it, because one, self-defense, two, meditation, and three, it was healing for my body. In fact, that's how I got there. I was told I had to have back surgery. I went to this Chinese doctor in the early 1970s, and he said, "You don't need surgery. Just do these exercises, come to my classes." He completely changed my diet from a horrible diet to a pretty good diet. And, I'm 74 years old now. I'm knocking on wood, and I have zero back pain, never had the surgery. And so also, I've taught nutrition for many, many years in acupuncture colleges, and also a lot of public speaking engagements where I talked about different aspects of nutrition. And so you'd think I'd kind of know what I'm doing. However, I developed what I call TBS, TBS for too busy syndrome, which many Americans fall into that too busy syndrome, right? There's just, oh my gosh, I've got to get all this done. So mine happened because I became the president of an acupuncture college. My mentor, who was the past president of the college, passed away, and he'd asked me to take over. I didn't want to do it. It was a horrible job. We saved the school, so it was great, but I did it because he was my mentor, and I felt, that I was honored that he wanted me to do it. But I was also teaching. I was running my acupuncture practice, and I was still seeing patients. I had a son in high school, so I was schlepping him around all the time. He didn't have a driver's license. And I fell into that syndrome that so many Americans fall into. I was just, quotes, too busy to take care of myself. And suddenly my health spiraled downwards, which it can happen. You can see things happening, but then all of a sudden you kind of fall off the cliff. And for me, I developed actually fairly severe diabetes. I developed atrial fibrillation, which I'd actually had for years, but I was able to control it with herbs. But it then became uncontrollable. So with AFib, you're missing heartbeats. You might, in my case, I would miss about one beat in 4, and of course, then the blood can pool in the heart, and it's a primary cause of stroke because that blood, when it pools, will form clots. So I developed AFib, but then that became atrial flutter. And atrial, now I was able to treat my AFib, but the atrial flutter is a different animal completely. Um, I discovered it because I was shopping in Trader Joe's. I don't know if you have Trader Joe's back there, but it's very popular here.
Yeah,
And
we do.
okay, and so I'm walking down the frozen food aisle with my shopping cart, and the next thing I know, I'm lying face down on the floor. And I knew something was wrong because I opened my eyes and there was a container of hummus right on my touching my nose. And I knew that wasn't right. It took me a minute to realize what wasn't right about it. But so I said, I'm fine. I'm fine. I come from the generation where if you're playing sports, doesn't matter if you break an arm, you're always fine, right? So I said, I'm fine, but they didn't believe me. They called the ambulance. They took me into the hospital. And it was a crazy busy night, just amazing. One poor doctor there, and you could see it was like a deer in the headlights. They did an EKG, electrocardiogram, to see what was happening with my heart. And I saw the woman that did it, who was a physician's assistant, come over and talk to the doctor. And then they both looked up and looked at me. And he shook his head no. And so she shook her head no. And then about an hour later, they released me. Well, it wasn't until I got the notes of that encounter that I found out that I was in terrific atrial flutter. And so with flutter, there's one place in the heart, the sinoatrial node, that sends out messages, right? Electrical messages to tell the chambers of the heart when they're supposed to beat in the proper rhythm. Well, with atrial flutter, for some reason, other cells start sending out mixed up messages. And so when I got my report, it indicated that the ventricles, the larger, lower chambers of my heart, were beating at 72 beats a minute, which was fine. But my atria, the smaller upper chambers, were beating at 288 beats. That's 4 times normal. And so I had a 4-to-1 atrial flutter. I was lucky to be alive, actually. So I also had prostate problems. I had a fungal infection on my legs. I had gout that was so severe I had to use a walker. And I had severe knee inflammation that had me hospitalized for 4 days, a little bit before this atrial flutter incident. So I was a mess. There's no other way to say it. I was just a mess. And it was all my own doing or undoing. And so it all came to a head on December 18th, 2023. I found a really great cardiologist, electrocardiologist, and we decided I would do a catheter ablation. That's where they snake a wire up through the groin all the way up into the heart itself, and then they kill selectively the cells that are sending out the bad messages. It's astonishing. So they had more monitors on me. If you get an electrocardiogram, they'll put the leads on you, 12 leads. I must have had 50 leads on me. They put them everywhere on my body, and a huge team of people working on me. And they went in and they ablated or killed those dysfunctional cells. And I came out of it and I felt great. The doctor said everything went well, except they had to keep me under anesthesia a little longer than they planned because I had so many cells that were dysfunctional. It's like, okay. But they even sent me home that night. I was doing so well. Next day, I was watching a movie with my son and my wife in the late afternoon into the evening, and I was suddenly having real difficulty breathing. And I just tried to, breathe through it and stay relaxed and not get anxious. But it got to the point finally where I was having trouble breathing at all. And I said, honey, I'm sorry, I need to go to the emergency room. So they took me in, and it's fascinating, Tina, the things that go through your head as you're dealing with emergency situations. And so as they were driving me to the hospital, I had this song. I couldn't get it out of my head. I kept humming it. And one of my favorite musicians, a guy from the 70s, Warren Zevon, wrote a song as he was dying from lung cancer. Now, he knew he was dying, and he did one last show on David Letterman. And he was David Letterman's favorite singer-songwriter. And so before he died, Zevon got all of his famous musical buddies, Bruce Springsteen and everybody else you can think of, and he did one last album. And so as I'm there gasping for breath, literally barely able to breathe on the way to the emergency room, this song, so the shadows are fallen and I'm running out of breath. Keep me in your heart for a while. And I kept singing that over and over. I didn't sing it out loud. I didn't want to scare my family, but that's what was going through my head. So I was admitted, I was diagnosed, I got incredible care at the hospital, but I was diagnosed with pneumonia and congestive heart failure. And at 72 years old, that's a really, really dangerous combination. So, and then as I'm lying there, and I was there for 4 days, I just realized I had way too much to live for than to die at that point. I had not achieved my purpose. I still had many things to do. And so I really vowed to turn my life around. And so my story is really about a few things. One, it's about giving thanks for all that I have, including the gift of life and my family and my friends. It's about returning to my purpose for being. And my purpose is to end suffering. And then creating the intention to turn my life around. And again, the title of the book is Never, Ever, Ever Give Up. And I really decided I wanted to be an inspiration for others to give them hope when they get older and they think that it's too late. There are all these mythologies like, oh, if you're over 60, you can't build muscle mass. Totally wrong. If you're over 60, you can't do this and that. And I'm living proof that you can do it over 70. So that's one thing. Also, the story is about integration. I do functional medicine and traditional Chinese medicine, and a lot of people that I have trained to become acupuncturists kind of throw Western medicine under the bus. And they think, oh, there's no, I don't want anything to do with that. I'm not going to go see a doctor, etc. And I really try to convince them otherwise, because it's beautiful when you integrate it. In my studies in China, I did a diabetes program over there. I am a guy. My doctorate is in gynecological endocrinology, so I spent a lot of time in gynecology clinics. And all of the doctors I worked with had dual degrees in both traditional Chinese medicine and Western biomedicine. And to watch it work in China, it's like a hand in a glove. It's beautiful. They get done in 1 day in gynecology what it can take 6 or 7 months to do here in the United States. It's someday I'll walk you through a typical day in a clinic there, but it's amazing. So the integration. And so Western medicine has things to offer that traditional Chinese medicine doesn't. That catheter ablation, it absolutely saved my life. And I don't know how to fix that. I know how to fix AFib, but not atrial fibrillation. So it saved my life. And then the heroic care I got for pneumonia and for heart failure, amazing. Again, Western medicine, the kudos, they deserve it. But then on the other side, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, naturopathy have things to offer that Western medicine doesn't, right? They do much better job of mind, body, spirit integration and recognition of the mind-body connection. And so in my case, they had been digging around in my heart, thank God, but then they just kind of threw me out. It's like, okay, you're good, go home. Well, I know enough to run the right tests on myself. And as I would expect, I had terrific amounts or horrific amounts of inflammation in my heart and my arteries. So I was just wide open for a future heart attack or any number of problems. I also, by the way, had very, very high blood pressure at that time. I also had no drive. My testosterone had bottomed out. And so I really had to get back on the horse, so to speak. And so the Tai Chi and Qigong allowed me to open up my body, my mind, my spiritual energies and let them flow. And then my experience in functional medicine gave me the knowledge of the tests to run that my doctor did not run, and doctors generally don't run. One was high sensitivity C-reactive protein. Now, C-reactive protein is a protein that is an indicator that there's inflammation in the body. And they call it quantitative CRP, just is a general measure. Somewhere in your body, you have inflammation. Helpful, but I'd rather pin it down. And so a high sensitivity, which is often called cardiac C-reactive protein, will tell you if there's inflammation in the heart and the arteries. And mine was through the roof. I also tested uric acid, which, because I had gout, I knew my uric acid would be high. But what doctors often don't realize is that uric acid is and maybe the primary driver of cardiovascular disease, of stroke, of diabetes, and obesity. If you have high uric acid, it's almost impossible to lose weight. And that realization goes all the way back to 1892. A Scottish physician named Alexander Haig wrote a book or a treatise that was reprinted 7 times about the dangers of uric acid. And it was, like I said, it sold like hotcakes. It was the hot thing. And then everybody forgot about it. And it wasn't until just a few years ago that a book called Drop Acid by Perlmutter came out. And he had written Wheat Belly before that. And he went through all the dangers, again, of high uric acid. And so by doing those 2 tests, I could see where I needed to get to the root of my inflammatory problems. I won't get into this much, but I checked interleukin 6. And interleukin 6 is a chemical that causes a lot of inflammation that leads to a lot of pain in the body. So I was off the charts in all 3 of those. And so my goal was to turn it all around in 120 days. I needed, a definite time frame. So I needed to recreate the balance, right? I needed to focus, give up all the things that weren't necessary. I call it closing loops, those things that draw your attention. I needed more resilience. I had to work on my sleep. I needed a cohort of people. So I enrolled my friend Catherine in working out in the mornings with me and working with me on writing a book. I started doing more sound healing. I found that 40 hertz, which puts you into brainwave states. We talk about, beta is where most of us live during the day. It's a high energy state. Then we want to get into alpha so that we can start to relax, and then delta and theta, which are deeper levels for sleep. But what's come to light recently is if you do above beta, a 40 hertz wave pattern, it helps you to get tremendous focus. So I worked on that. And then the physical piece, I was so weak that I didn't think I could get to the gym, but I did. And I then started diving deeply into, and I'm one of those people, I'm up at 4 o'clock reading research, but I went much deeper here. And I looked at strength training more so than I ever had. And I started finding a lot of studies. And so I was debating, do I want to focus more on weight loss, or do I want to focus more on strength training? Now, obviously they can go together, but I needed to focus on one or the other. And I found that multiple articles that have come out recently and studies showing that obesity has been over implicated in mortality. Now, it's still critical, obviously, but loss of strength was even more important. And so the loss of strength could easily be hidden if you're looking at obesity, because a lot of times when people are obese, they're not very strong. But I focused on the strength training. And, I started out just, barely being able to get into the gym. I was going 5 days a week, kind of alternating upper and lower body, doing 1 day of cardio, although it wasn't really much cardio, a couple minutes. But I noticed that, I was still very fatigued. I wasn't making a lot of progress. And then I did another deep dive looking at supplements. And I do a lot of herbs, a lot of supplements from my training as functional medicine and traditional Chinese medicine. But I started looking at ways to get my testosterone up, because without testosterone, you have no drive. It's like you come up with a good idea and it's like, oh, yeah, but that's too much work. And so I had to get my testosterone up. So I researched supplements to get my testosterone up, and it worked. And then I looked at supplements to increase my free testosterone, which is another even more important than total testosterone. And I found supplements that did that. I started working on those, so got a little testosterone back. So then I could work out harder. And by working out harder, I increased my testosterone some more. So it's this, you're either spiraling upward or you're spiraling downward, is how I look at it. And then I started looking at other supplements for strength. And the one thing I could find no negative studies on, other than a couple pounds of weight gain from water, was creatine monohydrate. And, I was never big on stuff like that. It's like, oh, that's for the weightlifters and the, guys who want to be Mr. America or something. But what I found was creatine not only helped with muscle strength, it helped with endurance. And it actually, then in further research, I found that it was good for brain health and even for the skin. And so in 4 months, and now I had been working out before I was sick, and I'd kind of been on a plateau. In 4 months, I doubled my strength, literally, or more, in 15 different exercises, and one, I didn't quite double it. I then doubled it in a couple months. But so I was able to double my strength at 73 years old at that point. And in fact, my son came home from college, and I was kind of walking around the house in a t-shirt, and he goes, "Dad, you've never had muscles in your arms before." So it looked better, it felt better. I had more energy and a lot more strength. I had gotten to the point where I could barely get out of a chair, and now I can hop up out of a chair. So then, with all of that, I knew to maintain that, I really needed to maintain my gut health, right? Because gut health equals mental health. We have 100 trillion bacteria in our gut, and it's really the blend of those that determines our health. People with Parkinson's have a completely different microbiome, different bacteria in their gut than do healthy people. People with bowel problems have different bacteria. People with weight problems. They've been doing for years now fecal transplants, where they take poop from a skinny person, put it into an overweight person, and the overweight person gets skinny. That's crazy, right? But so that's what I started working on. And I started really focusing on prebiotics. So things that are going to feed the bacteria. Because you can do probiotics, and that's great in many cases, and do yogurt and kefir, etc. But if you don't do the prebiotics, you can't feed them. So I started taking a deep dive there. So every Sunday morning, I get out my Instant Pot, and I make up 3 quarts of a chili-like food with beans and some meat, and I make up one that's more soupy, like a split pea soup. In my case, is one of my favorites. And so I'll make 3 quarts of each of those. And when I go to work, I take my little lunch pail, like I'm in 3rd grade, and I have 2 half-quart containers, one with the soup, one with the chili. And so that's kind of how I'm maintaining this. And so it's been now over a year since I had the problem, and I haven't been this healthy since I was about 40. So that's kind of my story.
So do you think the stress created a lot of these health issues or made the ones that you had worse?
There's no doubt at all. In my practice, like if someone, I used to do a lot of fertility work. I do less now because it's emotionally, it's hard to be treating 40 women who are trying to get pregnant, and obviously they're having difficulty. So if 10% get pregnant any month, that's a victory, but the other 35 are going to be crying with me. So I don't do as much of that. But the women that were coming to me primarily had been through the Western gamut, and they were coming to me with a diagnosis of unexplained infertility in almost every case. I mean, our record of having these patients become pregnant was astronomical, but mostly it was stress. And there are tests that you can do. If under stress, women and men will release more sex hormone binding globulin. And what that does is it binds to your sex hormones and makes them ineffective. So you can do a blood test and your hormones can look perfect, absolutely perfect. But if you have too much sex hormone binding globulin, you're not utilizing the hormones. And so we would test sex hormone binding globulin. And in almost all cases, it was high because it's nature's way of keeping women from becoming pregnant during a war, right? It's like it just shuts down the hormones. But also, we would do other tests for stress. In women, in particular, there's a difficulty in converting the basic, less active thyroid hormone called T4 into the very active thyroid hormone called T3. And so in men, usually not a problem, but in women, about 50% don't convert. And so doctors were checking, their three major tests they would do to check for thyroid disorders, but they weren't checking for what's called reverse T3. Now, reverse T3 mimics the active T3, but it's basically inactive, and it binds in the same receptor sites. So once again, you can have a perfect thyroid hormone, but you can't use the thyroid hormone. And so, kind of going down those ways, those are all from stress, all from stress. Most
Yeah.
of those
So
patients, yeah,
I
came in. Huh?
go ahead.
We came in and we would do, basic cortisol, circadian cortisol. They were all 100% of them out of the proper ranges, but their MDs didn't check any of those things. So yes, stress is at the core. Stanford did a study where they estimated that stress was the cause of 85% of doctor's visits. I'm not gonna argue with them.
Yeah. So years ago, I knew a handful of stories of women who tried to get pregnant. And, the more you try to get pregnant, the more stressed you're about getting pregnant. It,
Exactly. Oh
it's
my
hard.
God.
It's hard not to be stressed about it.
Yeah.
And then they would just kind of give up. And when they did give up, they got pregnant, or they would adopt a child and then get pregnant.
Exactly. Exactly. It's so interesting that you say that. It's one of my tricks, I'm going to call it, was when I would have a couple come in and they were trying really hard and they were just really, the wife is calling the husband at work and saying, get home, this is my fertile period, right? And they're both going nuts. Um, and so I would say, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on a special diet. We're not going to do any treatments. I want you to take your vacation, go to Hawaii. And the diet was like the simplest thing you can imagine because the diet wasn't the point. The point was they thought something was happening and they'd go to Hawaii and they enjoyed themselves and they relaxed and she'd come back pregnant, right? Over and over.
So I remember, meeting my husband, and I did want to have a family, but I told him, we can try, but if it doesn't happen, I don't want to go into all of this fertility treatment and everything else. I just don't want to do that. I don't want to do that to myself. I don't want to do that to you. Maybe we could think about adopting. But luckily, we didn't have that issue. But I know stress has a lot to do with it. So, and
And
then we're all
every
under a lot of stress. We're under a lot of change now. We've always been under a lot of change, but now it seems to be happening faster. And so that's why it's so important to have a self-care routine where you're taking care of yourself, you're aware of how much stress you are and when to back off of what's
you're,
stressing you out.
yeah, you're so right. That's to me, it's one of the I do lots of different things. We have lots of different tools to use. Red light, infrared, little devices you clip on your ears, and we do acupuncture and herbs and supplements. And the most important thing is to de-stress people. Of all of those things, we've got to reduce their anxiety and their stress.
Mm-hmm. And anxiety is through the roof right now.
Oh my
And
God.
and so is depression. It's like every single client coming to me for Reiki or energy healing has one or both right
Yeah.
now.
It's
Um,
the, Mhm.
it's funny because I just recently got on identical hormones because I have none. And my pharmacist said, well, you should have a lot of anxiety. And are you anxious? And I said, no, I'm not anxious. And she's like, how can that be?
right?
And I said, because I'm a Reiki master, I practice Reiki regularly. I meditate and practice mindfulness regularly. I know how to calm myself down. So, no, I'm not anxious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will write on my prescription pad, uh, don't watch the news, right?
Yes.
Watch a comedy tonight and no news, right? Because it's designed to make us crazy and anxious, right? And keep us tuned into the fear and etc. And we can only take so much of that before the body shuts down.
Yeah. And I know it sounds like a broken record to say meditate, but really, there's so many proven studies that meditation helps in all areas of your life. And if you can't quiet your mind, you can't connect to that wise inner wisdom that you have inside you.
That's that's beautiful. Exactly. Yeah. And I think a lot of people in our culture also don't have enough real contact like you do because you're doing Reiki, you're doing other healing modalities. But I find so many people that don't really have physical contact. All of their friends are on the internet, or, they're emailing, but they're not getting that personal touch, which would increase oxytocin levels, which is so healing. It calms your brain. Well, there's a great study when my wife was doing her doctoral program. It was online, and she had one really good teacher from the Osher Center at Harvard, and he would bring in these really cool studies. But in one study, they put uh, electroencephalograms on the patient and the doctor. Now, obviously, they're not blinded to that because they've got these wires on their head, but they didn't know what it was for. And they did many, many doctor-patient relationships. And what they found was that when rapport was developed, and they determined that by entrainment, when their brain waves matched, right, of the doctor and the patient, so they were in sync, those patients healed in half the time that the other patients did. And so it just, we all know that bedside manner is important. We all know that listening is important, but sometimes that gets overlooked in a medical setting.
And even look at an energy healer, an experienced energy healer or Reiki healer. When you go to them, I often teach newbies about like auras and energy fields. And as I sit and talk with a new client, I say, you're in my energy field right now, and I'm in yours. And if I'm trained to be in the alpha brainwave state, practicing Reiki on you, you're going to go into the alpha brain state. That's how it
Absolutely.
works.
Yep. I remember I've had cranial sacral treatments a few times, and they were done by really, really mindful healers, right? And someone said, well, did you like it? Did you enjoy it? And I said, I have no idea. I was asleep within 30 seconds, right? My entire being simply surrendered and relaxed because they were so clear and focused. And I was in their energy field, and I was being held like a baby.
Yeah, and sometimes people don't respond to Reiki, or I have different modalities I'm trained in. So I'll suggest like access bars consciousness, which is just gentle touches to the head. That's all I'm touching is spots on your head. And sometimes people respond better to that
Hmm.
than
Yeah,
Reiki. So you have to try different things. But if you're stressed and you're unable to calm yourself, find a practitioner that can help you get there.
that's the bottom line. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then you got to do your work. So last night I was speaking to my Reiki teacher about a client that I'm trying to help, and I'm not quite sure how to help her. And she said, a lot of people, it's wonderful. They're trying these modalities and, but they're not sticking to anything. They're not practicing anything. If you have a chronic problem, like you had so many health problems, but you were exploring everything. You looked at everything. You looked at supplements, you looked at stress reduction, you went to the doctor. I'm sure you did other modalities, but some people have chronic problems. They come in, they have one session, and then they disappear.
Yeah.
So, what kind of results are you going to have if you keep just trying things and not committing to anything or committing the time to really getting better?
Yeah. You've hit it right on the head. Yep, that's it.
Yep,
You
that's my
have to.
soapbox for today.
Well, I love it. It's a great soapbox. I mean, I tell people from the beginning that we are a team. You know, you want my advice, you want my experience, but we're a team. It's not like a doctor throwing a drug at you, right? It's you actually do have to do the work. You're so right on, Tina.
Yeah. And the other thing I think is wonderful about this is you are a holistic health practitioner, but you had your own struggles. And so just because we have a lot of knowledge and practice, the practitioners themselves struggle too. But that doesn't stop us from helping others. That doesn't stop us from sharing our wisdom. And we work on ourselves too. The other point to that too is we get help. So if we can't figure it out ourselves, get help.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I I love your attitude and the way you approach these things. Probably because what I feel is correct, right? But I just love your energy.
Thanks. Well, I love this. So I love talking about this. I'm very passionate about health and wellness. And I see a bright future for us. Like as a collective, we're struggling, right? But slowly and surely, we're figuring it out, and we're figuring out how to heal from. I'm not even talking about just health issues. I'm talking about multi-generational trauma, and we're figuring it out. So again, don't give up. It's interesting that your book is called that because just the previous guest that I had, she also said the same thing.
Huh.
She said, don't ever, ever give up.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
moment you give up, everything is going to fall apart. Um, but what's the difference actually? Sometimes surrendering is good.
It's so I tend to be a knower. That was my thing growing up and in high school. And then I studied with Peter Ralston, who is, I believe, the top teacher of ontological study, right? The contemplation studies. And he, over a period of a decade, taught me that I don't know anything, right? And so it's all about surrendering, right? Now I
Yeah.
know the facts and figures and supplements and things, but I don't really know anything. And so that freed me up tremendously. And so the main aspect of the art that he taught was surrendering. It's surrender. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that it's great to have goals and it's great to have your manifestations and want to manifest things, but sometimes they just don't quite happen. And you're putting all this energy into it. And then sometimes you need to get to the point where, okay, universe, I told you what I wanted. I've been working toward it. I'm just going to put it in your hands. And I'm going to sit back and I'm going to pay attention to what happens next.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, absolutely.
But if
Yeah,
you really, really want something, don't give up.
yeah, and particularly around your health, right? Just,
Hmm.
but I mean, if I believed all the mythology of the things that you cannot do over the age of 70, I'd probably be dead by now, right? Literally. And so I don't have I don't, my gout, I have no pain. And so people with gout think you have to have pain, but there are ways that you don't have pain. And I found what they are. And now I'm in, I have no problem. Like I said, I was in a walker a great deal of that year. And I ended up in the hospital because of my knee blowing up. And I don't have those problems now. So yeah, keep looking for the answer.
So I know you found some solutions. Are any of those solutions on your website or in your book? Because you also talked about, you figured out how to increase your testosterone.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
is it,
Yeah,
go ahead.
there's our educational website, which is thebalancingpoint.net. There's a ton of information on there, a tremendous amount of information. Some
Okay.
old radio shows, some newer things. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember talking with you a few months ago in a pre-interview, and I was just shocked that you were able to overcome congestive heart failure because I didn't even think you could.
Yeah. And my patients are pleased that I did it because now I have even better understanding of how to treat them. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dr. John, I so enjoyed talking to you, and the energy of us together was great. And that's why I love meeting holistic practitioners like you. And there are solutions out there for some very major problems, and you can overcome them. And so contact Dr. John if you've got an issue and he's been through it already, or find the right practitioner for you.
Yep. Thank you so much, Tina. Um, yeah, this was great.
So again, check out his website, thebalancingpoint.net,
Yep.
and reach out to Dr. John Nieters if you need any assistance.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.